Hi guys, welcome to another Biglipz podcast. My name is Catherine Reese, joined as always by the wonderful Sam Macaulay Blair. So just a quick recap. Obviously, we are two former and current film students. We're now on episode 20, which is insane. Of our Biglipz podcast, and this week, because of course it was me that was choosing it, so we're talking about movie monsters. Because I think I've yet to pick a subject that isn't horror related in some way, so I thought I'd stick with the theme. So basically this episode we're going to be talking about movie monsters, and I've kind of left this open to interpretation a wee bit, so it could be actual monsters and aliens and zombies or whatever, or it could be monsters like horror movie villains like Michael Myers or Freddy or Jason or anything like that. So yeah, so we'll just jump right in. Start with the basics basically. So Sam, what or who is your favourite movie monster?
Okay, so obviously there are a lot. And I kind of, it's one of those things that I didn't even think about just how many there are. It wasn't until because I wrote down all the ones that sort of came to mind, and then I was like, just because there's always the way brains are, there's always big ones that you forget.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I'll do a quick Google just to see what comes up, just to see how it's sort of if there's anything that I've forgotten about that might be worth mentioning, maybe a smaller movie that I watched years ago that just hasn't immediately come to mind. And yeah, it's just when I was looking suddenly I was like, actually there are loads of movies, because at first I was went down, my brain went straight to horror, but thinking about it, there are loads of movies that just have monsters in them as well. So there are so many out there, and a lot of which we've sort of touched in the podcast before. And my honestly my top pick, I'll start with my top pick. Is a film that has been mentioned ridiculous amount of times on this podcast, but I can't not mention it because to me it really is the holy grail of movie monsters. So my pick is the Xenomorph from Alien, just because I genuinely think there's nothing else out there like it. Obviously H.R. Geiger, who's the artist he was the artist basically behind the film. I remember when I first watched the first Alien film when I was 13. I remember watching the behind the scenes stuff, and I think it was Ridley Scott talked about finding H.R. Geiger, and he was just this mental mental artist who I think was on loads of hallucinogenic drugs, but he was just this properly haunted man. He was scared of the stuff.
Some stuff.
Yeah, well, he was scared of the stuff in his own head, I think, and that could not translate more effectively, because I genuinely do think that just the design in Alien, the artistry of it all is phenomenal. It really does look alien and sinister. Obviously, there's the whole phallic sort of imagery and metaphor, which is
yeah, I was going to mention that.
Yeah. But even within the context of the film, the design is used so well. I never get over the cleverness of that final sort of sequence where she's in Sigourney Weaver's Ripley. She's in the sort of escape docket and the wee sort of escape ship effectively, and you think it's all sort of done. I mean, it's not, because the movie just keeps kind of going. So you're okay, this is a lot of a lot going on and not a lot happening at the same time. And then obviously one of the pipes it turns out to be the alien's head, and that alone justifies the design of the monster. But it's just, I genuinely think it's crazy to me how alien and creepy it looks in just so many different ways, how nightmarish. And it's mad that movie came out in 1979, and there's not been anything else since, I don't think, that's come anywhere near as close to having that powerful and having that much of an impact and having just that strong a design. So yeah, I literally think it is the sort of perfect movie monster, and even obviously in a mechanical sense as well, even the whole acid for blood and the sort of process that it takes, the whole there's so many facets of it being this like proper like living nightmare. So yeah, my top pick would be good old Alien.
That's so funny because if you can see, my top pick is also the Xenomorph from Alien. And I think basically for the reasons you've kind of outlined, I think it's, like you were saying, it's perfectly designed where it looks really otherworldly and alien, which obviously works perfectly for the movie. I think as well, like you were talking, it's got the kind of different facets of it, so all of it's scary, like the face hugger's scary, the chest burster's scary as well. And I think that's funny because it brings in a wee bit of the kind of body horror which became really big in like the 80s and stuff. So I wonder if that was like a predecessor to that, maybe. Not sure.
That's a really good point, actually. Yeah, the sort of introduction of the body horror. What you mentioned as well about like the sort of separate stages, I think it's probably like one of the best examples of it, because it does feel like a real creature. I think that's one of the things as well. It's like there is like a life sort of cycle and life sort of system to it, and like an evolution to it, which you don't really get with like monsters. Usually they just are the monster and they appear and that's sort of it. There's not usually like that much of like a logic and a process. But it's also it's also really interesting how well the movie shows you all these things, like basically exposits all these things, but every part of it is like threatening and scary. It's not like...
even like the eggs, because they're just like almost like foreboding because they're kind of like green and like luminescent almost, and it again that gives it that kind of otherworldly thing because eggs don't look like that.
Exactly.
Sorry to butt in on your Alien chat, but I just wanted to get that out there. Did you have any others?
I had loads, to be honest. Another one was obviously the Pale Man from Pan's Labyrinth, who we've talked about a lot before. The Thing from Another World, from John Carpenter's The Thing, which again is just like the concept of it alone is so good, but then the practical sort of design of it is like really sort of grotesque and horrifying.
I think with The Thing as well, something that's really horrifying about that is that it can hide, it like hides in plain sight, so that's like one of the scariest parts of it. You don't know, obviously that's the whole point of particular bits in the movie, that they don't know who to trust and who's actually them, so
exactly. And it still manages to like surprise you with like some of the reveals and again like the whole, like I think that because obviously it takes on these like human forms or like assimilates them, when you then see like its sort of failed attempts, where it gets like half copied and then sort of runs away and it's like all sort of melted and stuff, that adds just like another dimension to the horror, because I guess you have like a reference for it, and it makes it like sort of inherently personal as well. Predator, I thought, was another one. Not really scary, but I do think it's a really cool design, and worth mentioning because I don't know if you've ever seen like the original designs of it, but they went like... I don't
think I have, no.
No, they had them like completely different. They had like different sort of designs that they were like sort of trialing, and it took them a while to sort of land on the finished concept. And I love the fact that so obviously like it has a reveal. Have you seen Predator?
Yeah, I've seen the first one.
Yeah. So obviously it has like the reveal where it takes off the helmet and Arnold gets that great line. But apparently
which one?
The one with the swear word in it. But so obviously it has like the reveal, and it has like the mandibles. I don't know if you know this, but it was James Cameron who was the one that suggested that I have mandibles. Apparently he was on a plane on a plane, and someone was like, whoever it was like designing it was like, I think they were talking to James Cameron about the fact that they were like stuck trying to nail this sort of like monster design, and I think James Cameron looked at it and was like, oh, you should stick some mandibles on that. And I was talking to a friend who absolutely loves like Predator. Like this was like a year ago we were talking about this, and we mentioned that story because we've talked about it a lot. He was just like, do you know what? Fair play to James Cameron for even knowing what mandibles are, because he was like, the only reason I know what mandibles are because of that story. And I was like, that's a good point.
That's very true.
Like without the Predator, I would not know what mandibles are. So for him to even think and be able to name them was an impressive feat of its own. But yeah,
probably his best.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, I mean, he directed Aliens as well, so
Yeah.
it's funny that like again the I guess that's one of those first instances of like those universes crossing. Or actually, that is the first instance of like those universes crossing because Predator didn't exist at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think like the Predator's a cool design, and again like a cool concept with like them hunting humans, and I do kind of think part of me thinks it's kind of nuts that we only really have like one great Predator movie, and I kind of think that's really bizarre.
I can't remember. I've seen Alien versus Predator, and is it in that movie when fighting the aliens is like a rite of passage, or is that in the original? I can't remember why they're attacking people in the original.
No,
Just
that is
that's what they're like.
Yeah, basically, yes, that's sort of like that is their like culture. Is
Hence the name.
They have, yeah, exactly. Yeah, they really live up to it. I do think there is like a cool like sort of mythology around them. I do think they are like interesting in that sense. Like yeah, but at the same time, it's they just haven't really been well utilized. I feel like I guess it's difficult to like expand on them because they don't really speak, and if you try and explain them too much, then they kind of lose a lot of mystique and they kind of get a bit silly. But maybe we'll get another good Predator movie someday. Obviously mentioning James Cameron and mentioning Predator, I have to shout out Terminator.
Of course, yeah.
Which is another very just a very sort of simple idea, but like beautifully executed across like the two good movies. I have the Attack the Block Aliens. I
actually haven't seen it.
I've seen that movie once, and it literally like when it first came out, so I couldn't even like I could tell you like next to nothing about the film, but I do remember just like thinking constantly. I was like, that's a really cool design for the aliens, and it came up on like when I was doing research and stuff. That it was another one that was like mentioned, and I was like, yeah, it's nice to see it getting shouted out. Another one is Pennywise the Clown.
Okay.
From the It movies, both the 90s one and the sort of modern one, which is impressive because obviously Tim Curry's Pennywise was like such an iconic performance. The fact that they actually had like another actor come in and managed to basically make the role his own and do such a good job of it, I thought was like really impressive. And another one that I want to sort of shout out, which is going to be a very controversial pick, but it is a completely like personal one. Is Godzilla, but not the Godzilla that everyone would probably think. My like personal favorite Godzilla, to probably my great shame, is the 1998 one. 'Cause I was obsessed with that movie.
The Matthew Broderick one.
The Matthew Broderick one.
Yeah.
I was obsessed with that movie when I was a kid. Like I loved that movie so much, and Godzilla was just like the coolest thing. And I haven't. Obviously, we did our podcast on nostalgia. I can't remember the last time I watched that film. It probably was when I was a kid. Maybe when I was like early sort of teens. I don't imagine it's gonna hold up in any kind of way. But at the same time, like I didn't really care about like most of the film when I was a kid. I just watched it for like the monster stuff, and to me, the monster was like a really cool design.
I think in fairness, because I watched it for the first time fairly recently, like it was on the telly, so I caught the end of it kind of thing. And if you just accept it for what it is, like a kind of 90s disaster movie, it was pretty good. There was a lot of the monster, which is nice. Because sometimes with monster movies, sometimes it works really well, but other times it doesn't, when the monster just doesn't appear for half of the movie. Or it was obviously CGI'd out its nuts, so it was too expensive to show the monster.
That is very true, yeah, because obviously the 2014 Godzilla went the other way, where they held off, which I thought worked for that movie, but also I can see why people had problems with it, especially because like they do that really weird thing early on in the movie where they basically set up as if Godzilla is going to come and fight a monster, and it does happen, but it just happens off screen, which makes it really bizarre.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I had to shout out Godzilla. He's my boy.
Love it. Love it. So for my choices, obviously, I had a Alien, a classic. I cannot go a single podcast apparently without mentioning Jaws.
I thought I'd leave that one for you.
You knew it was coming, yeah. I think that's one of those examples. I've spoken about it before, so I'll just touch on it briefly. Where you don't see the monster. Jaws is a long movie, but you do not see the shark for like half the movie or something, and then when you do see it, it's kind of like sparingly until the end, and it's done so well. But we've spoken that to death, so I'll move on. And then my other choice that I wanted to talk about was the crawlers in the movie The Descent.
I've never seen that.
I was a bit hesitant, but it's actually super, super good. And
Okay.
the crawlers in it, they're really just perfectly creepy, and you see just enough of them for them to be scary.
Yeah.
And they've got the kind of opposite thing to Alien, where they're scary because they're a bit more human, and they almost look like people, but there's something weird like about the way that they move, and their faces are super scary. And there was a couple of times there was like a good proper jump scare as well with the monsters, which is rare. And then they did another one that they did is my favourite thing in movies, where it's kind of in the background of shots, and I read somewhere that the actors didn't even know that they were in the background, so they were just doing it out of their scene or whatever.
Love that.
So there's a lot of creepy moments. There's probably moments where I've missed, but there's other moments where you're like, oh my god, or because you've seen one of them, you start to freak yourself out. Like, did I just see something move? I think as well, obviously The Descent, they go spelunking and get caught in the caves, basically. And I think this idea of being trapped somewhere is scary enough. Being trapped in a cave underground is also very scary, but the fact that they're trapped there in the habitat of these monsters just makes it even scarier. Like, they're not the ones, they don't have the advantage. The monsters do, because that's their home, that's where they live, they know all about it. Like when my bestie, she's always talking about in horror movies when, like, if the villain's in your house, surely you've got the advantage because you know where everything is. But that never seems to be the case in horror movies.
Frustrating.
But yeah, no, I think you should definitely give The Descent a watch, because
definitely will.
It's good. I'd like to hear your thoughts as well. And it's funny because it's one that I've heard about, and I've always been like, maybe. And then when I did watch it, I was like really enjoying it.
Are there two parts to it? Am I right in thinking that?
I've only seen the first one.
Were they shot like together, or is it like A Quiet Place where it's like part 2 is just the second one?
That one I'm not sure. I think though, I was hesitant to watch the second one because it kind of it has the potential to like undo the ending of the first one.
Yeah. I think that's the thing with horror movie sequels in general, is like they're so rarely good that like I guess if it's like a new horror film, I'd maybe be more inclined. Like if a sequel came out just now, I'd be more inclined to see it. Mm-hmm. But if it already exists and I don't really know much about it, I'm probably not going to watch it, just because like I feel like if I haven't really heard about it, then it's probably not going to be great.
I think horror movie endings as well are really difficult to do. So I feel like this one had a really good ending, and I don't want to watch something that then just like completely undoes everything that the original did.
Yeah, no, that's very fair, and like you say, like it is difficult pulling off. Like usually horrors are have like great moments, but it is difficult to get a horror that's like really good all the way through, start to finish, and like ends things really well. And like you say, they do always, like the way that horror movies tend to end as well, they do always kind of run the risk of retroactively like sort of spoiling the first film.
Or I think it'd be so easy to like fall into the cliche of like at the very end of the horror movie, like in Carrie, when her hand comes up through the grave, like that like kind of final scare thing that's a bit overdone and cheesy now. So yeah, I don't know how we started rambling about horror movie endings, but
there's a sub-podcast inside this podcast.
Exactly. So moving on from that, what in your opinion makes horror movie, and I mean you've spoken about it before obviously when you were describing your favourite, but what do you think makes a good movie monster? Like what makes them scary? Or
there's so many. This is again like I wrote down one thing and then started writing down more and more. I mean, the biggest thing is obviously going to be the design. Like, you know, you can't, the design has to be good for it to work, because that is like the basis. It's kind of like, you know, if you got a movie, you need a good script. If you want to make a good movie, like, it doesn't matter how great at lighting you are, or how great at cinematography, or how good at acting, or, you know, how good at directing you are. Like, if you don't have a good script, like, there's only so much you can do. Like, you kind of are fighting a losing battle, and it's the same with this. You know, if you don't have a good design, if like you had a design that just fundamentally does not work, then it doesn't really matter what you do with it. It will not work, I think. So I think that's kind of the biggest thing. I think for me, I really dig when there's like a cool concept behind like the creepiness. It Follows is like a good example of like, it can sort of take any form, and it's always sort of coming for you.
It's kind of like almost like an updated version of a zombie, like this idea that zombies don't sleep, so they're constantly, that is what kind of makes them scary, is that they're constantly coming after you, and It Follows is the same. Yeah,
exactly. So that, you know, it just adds to the sort of paranoia of the film. Like, it does sort of help you inhabit the like sort of mindset of the characters. So that is definitely, like, you know, the concept is definitely like another one. Obviously talks about Alien, just like, because that's the thing with the Xenomorph and Alien, is it's not just like one great idea, it's like so many great ideas, and they're melded together so well. And again, the rest of the film around it holds up as well, because there's so much world building and realism in that film, that like the horror, it's, you know, again, it feels like as much effort was put into like all aspects of that film, not just the monster. You know, it wasn't like they just came up with a cool monster and they were like, we can call it a day here.
Yeah, that's such a good example as well, because it's obviously shot in like late 70s, but it feels like they're in space. There's nothing like kind of Star Trek-y about it where it looks like a set. Obviously that helps. I feel like it would be a bit, if you didn't believe that they were in space stuck with this monster, it wouldn't be quite as scary.
Yeah, very true, and it sells obviously the grittiness of the sort of setting and the realism and like the design, but also in like the characters, because they do just sort of feel real people, and I love the way that they just sort of, the movie has a lot of time to sort of just like focus on like what would really be meaningless stuff, where they're just sort of talking about like bonuses, and they're treating everything so sort of like mundane. The way they sort of act with each other, they do feel like people that sort of work and live together. There is just sort of like a realism to it. It's almost like you're like, you just are watching these like real people, and the sort of like casualness that they. Again, I like the fact that the movie doesn't make a big deal. You know, obviously this has just turned into a deep dive on Alien. Sorry.
I'm always happy to have a deep dive on Alien.
Obviously, when they get the distress call, I love the fact that it feels like the least movie handling of that sort of, because that is a trope. You know, like a distress call, and they go to investigate. But usually in like movies, it's like a really, you know, they make a really big sort of deal about it, but in that it's just kind of like, oh, they have to do it because like their bonuses are going to be forfeit, and they're just kind of bickering about it, and they're just kind of like, oh, I can't really be bothered, like, we don't really care. It's just sort of like a thing they have to do, rather than it being like, oh my god, there's a stress call, are the people going to be okay, like what's happening? It's
and then people like fighting over, no, I'll go and do it, I'll be the hero.
Exactly, yeah. There's not like any like extreme dramatization over it. It is just treated like a sort of fact of their daily lives, and again, that really sells the sort of authenticity of the world and excuses. You know, there's obviously like horror movies typically have like silly things, but I feel like, and there's you know, there's probably like loads of like things in Alien that happen in other horror movies, and you get like the captain going through the vents by himself, things like that. You know, the character going off into like tight corridors by themselves, which. Typically, like, as a silly thing to do in horror movies, again, like when you're watching the film, you buy into why that's happening. It doesn't feel silly. It doesn't ever like break the illusion. It doesn't ever feel like, it doesn't feel manufactured, I guess is the thing.
Yeah, I love that hysterical woman as well. Like, she's behaving exactly how I would be behaving in that scenario. Like, I do not get paid enough for this.
Exactly.
Apart from anything else, this is very scary.
Exactly. It's interesting how like when obviously they bring sort of John Hurt's character back, and Ripley wants to quarantine them, and they can't really be bothered. I mean, that definitely like, speaks a lot to like sort of contemporary society.
Yep, we've heard that before.
Yeah, exactly. But it is funny because like when you watch it, you do kind of align with other characters. You are kind of like, just let him on the ship. Like, even though you kind of know, he's called Alien, like, cause he's just had a thing jump in his face. It's probably not going to go well. But yeah, it's interesting to me, just how much it kind of sells all like the usually like sort of cheap moves. Again, I've gone like so far off topic. I'm sorry. Every section is going to be its own podcast, completely unrelated to what you bring up.
I love it.
Anyway, so what makes them scary? There's also sound design, which obviously we've talked about
Alien
before.
is a very good example of that.
Exactly. So now let me talk about another part of the film. Oh my god. Yeah. It is a good example of because even like the music, like not just like the sound design of like the monster itself, the music around it obviously can be a really. Again, we spent a long time in the last podcast talking about music, so I will keep that bit brief. But you can do a lot with the score to sort of characterize emotion, and if you have like a sort of distinct theme, the way that you can sort of layer that in. I mean, I guess Halloween is a great example of like Michael Myers has a brilliant theme that definitely like there's so much of that characterization I think comes from that music. More so.
Yeah, because Michael doesn't say a word. Like,
and he's wearing.
Doesn't really do much either, does he?
Exactly, he's wearing William Shatner's face. Again, that's it. Like he doesn't do much. Like even in terms of like the way he moves, obviously he is like a threat. He is like this presence. I mean, he's literally just called the Shape. But at the same time, there's not like a lot of characterization. And I mean, there is in the sense that he's just this big unstoppable force, but there's not in the sense that like it's not like there's points where he picks something up in a different way, and you're like, what's Michael thinking about this thing? Like he's very consistent. He's very consistently just this sort of force of like terrifying nature. And again, I think a lot of like the sort of characterization, the sort of horror does come from like that, obviously like iconic score. So that was another aspect. Obviously the acting, which I guess again I just mentioned there, is another really big part, because again, especially with a lot of these. Going back to Alien, I don't know if have you ever seen the deleted scenes from Alien?
I don't think so. No.
No. Okay. So I read this article years ago, and it was a really entertaining read, but it was basically about deleted scenes that genuinely would have like ruined otherwise like sort of perfect movies.
Oh yeah.
And one of the mentions on this is before I'd seen the deleted scenes for Alien. One of the mentions on that list was obviously Alien. And there is a deleted scene from that film where like these two characters are in a room and they see the alien, and I have no idea at all why anyone ever thought this would be a good idea. But the alien, I'm pretty sure, is like standing up, and then it kind of like crouches down onto like almost like it's sitting down, but it's on all fours, and then does this really weird like crab walk towards them, and then just like stands up again, and it is just like the most obvious. Honestly, like please watch it, because it's so bizarre. Like you watch it and you're legitimately just like like it really would have like tore the whole movie apart, because like it completely destroys all sort of sense of like menace and threat and all the sort of like mystery around it. It just looks like a person in a suit, and that's the thing. Like that was this time it was related. That's why it's obviously important. Like performance is such a big part, because you can do. I guess Pan's Labyrinth is a really good example.
I was going to mention your man Doug Jones.
My man. He does a lot with, which again we have talked about before, but he does a lot with like the performance. What he's doing that really sells. It sells the sort of like otherworldly nature and the threat and the character of it. Again, like talking about Michael Myers as being this relentless shape, the acting is sort of consistent to performance is exactly what it needs to be. So yeah, I think the performance, and then what was the last one? I said lighting. That was another one. You need to be really, really careful how you light these things. Usually, obviously, the lighting is very dark and sort of contrasty, and these things hide in the shadows. And then I think the last sort of point, told you there was a lot, I had for this one was imagination. And that sort of ties into, again, Alien, and also Jaws. And also
in fairness,
Jaws.
this just proves that Alien is the most superior movie monster. Surely,
That is-
every point that you brought up to say what makes it scary is relevant to Alien, then
Yeah, the best example is always Alien then.
yeah.
But I mean, to be fair, this one is also Jaws did it first, where again you know less is more, where you don't see it, you know, you don't see the threat for that much of the time, but it makes you think more, it makes you worry more, because you're like, where is it? And again, it follows another example of like it's not always there, but it's always coming, which I think is so important. Like, you know that it could be lurking around every corner. It could be like, you know, the next frame it could crop up in most unexpected and sort of horrifying way. So I think imagination is a really, really sort of strong one. Not just for like when you're watching it, but I think as well, like the best sort of horror movie monsters, you finish watching the movie and you're unsettled. Like I remember watching The Thing for the first time with one of my best friends when I was like 13, and when the movie finished, I had a pet cat and he would not go anywhere near it, because he was just like, he's like, I don't trust anything anymore.
That's amazing. Like, are you actually a cat?
Yeah, it literally.
Is your face gonna peel open?
Exactly. So yeah, I think imagination is like a really, really powerful tool.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my exhaustive list. Catherine,
No.
do you have
No,
anything?
they were really interesting. I think a lot of them obviously I would definitely agree with. One that I had was kind of like the whole movie itself, like you were talking about, and even just things like different aspects of the mise en scène, like lighting. You were talking about framing as well. We talked obviously about horror movies and having a lot of like dead space. And I think, like I mentioned before, having things in the background unnoticed or like the focus isn't on them, it just makes it really scary.
Well, that's like what was it, that like creepypasta or short story that everyone knows, where it's like, you know, the killer's in the house the whole time. It's that same idea, isn't it? Where it's
the phone calls coming
scariest...
from inside the house.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. Like that. Those are the creepiest things, when it's like there and you don't notice it.
Yep. Or like there was the story I remember when I was really young, and people would tell a story and it would properly scare the life out of me. Was the whole, someone's driving on a dark road and the person behind keeps flashing, and there's someone in the back seat of the car trying to kill them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that sort of stuff is.
Which I think definitely it ties into your kind of imagination thing as well. I think another thing I've written performance as well. But performance in the way that, and not in the way the alien does it for once, like the way that monsters move. Because I think that's why people think that snakes and spiders and that are scary, because they move in this really weird, like unhuman way. That just looks foreign and it's creepy. Like we were talking about The Ring, when she's crawling backwards down the stairs. That's creepy.
Yeah, that's a very good point actually.
And then the last thing, which is a bit more about just humans in general than maybe horror movies, but I think something that really freaks people out is when the monster is in some way kind of human.
Yeah.
And the way that I think it's maybe why people are so obsessed with like serial killers, because it's interesting because we can see something of us in them, but then they're doing these horrible, evil, like abhorrent things, and that's what makes it scary. Like, why are they like that?
Yeah, it's very true actually. The sort of the reflective nature of it is what makes it really unsettling.
That's like this is a weird example, but like I'm not a fan of like origin movies, origin stories, because I don't, especially for villains, because I don't care, because it makes it scarier if I don't know why they're like that.
Yep.
Like Cruella de Vil, I don't care why she wants to kill dogs. It's not scary. That was a poor example, but it's
no, but it's a relevant example.
Yeah, it works better that I don't know why I just think she's this crazy fashionista who wants to kill animals. Like that works better than her having had a. Do you know what I mean? Like a sad background. It's a movie. I just want my villains to be villains.
It is a weird one, that. Like how many people have ever watched Lady, like 101 Dalmatians and gone, well, what's her story?
Yeah.
Like it's just no one cares.
I don't care.
Exactly. Like you say, she's much more impactful as a character when you don't know, and like I guess goes back to the imagination thing as well, when it's left to you to kind of like decide why, you know, your own sort of reasons, and it means you read into more things. You know, you read into like beats of the performance, and maybe lines and stuff like that, and it adds like a dimension when you have to do some of the work, I think.
And I think as well it works with that scary thing. Like, it's scarier if you don't know if they're just insane.
Yeah.
Like, it could be anyone. It could happen. It could be anyone. That's like, especially movies like Scream, which I can't believe I didn't mention is a good movie monster, a Ghostface. But the whole point of those movies is that the Ghostface killer, like, is someone that they know.
Yeah.
And it's someone that's in their lives, and that's what's scary, because they don't. Especially Scream's really good at like isolating characters, so even you the viewer don't really know who Ghostface is, because you don't see them attacking that person, so it could be them, kind of thing.
Yeah, very true. And yeah, actually to jump on that point as well, and I mean this now is just like repeating like I guess the content that we have not just covered in podcast form, but we also have video essays on this channel, and that's gone into this sort of stuff. But one, I guess it's a stretch to call it a movie monster, but I'm going to call it a movie monster, would be like, you obviously, like in contemporary horror, like cults are a really big thing, and it's not one single entity, but it is like a collective that does act with a sort of single drive and single goal. You have like Hereditary is obviously a very recent like, sort of prominent example. And again, that plays off the same thing that you're saying, where it's like it's always, Paranormal Activity is the same thing, but it's always like a family member or someone close to you who has this sort of secret, and they are really sort of dangerous, and because it's the power of the sort of belief, but it is that same idea, isn't it, of like it's that sort of conviction and that sort of drive and that belief that pushes them forward and lets them push through like what would otherwise be like sort of safe boundaries and stuff like that. And yes, that is the same sort of idea of like it could be anyone, it could be anyone it could be people that you think you know really well. Get Out, there's another example as well. Yeah,
Get Out's a good one. No, interesting stuff, I think, anyway, but lame.
I agree.
So who cares? Moving on from that, is there an example or examples that you have of movie monsters that you didn't like for whatever reason? You didn't think they were scary, you maybe thought they were a bit ridiculous, or they just didn't work for you?
Yeah, so again, this was like when I was doing my research for the first one, the movie monsters, and I kind of realised just like how broad the list is, and I was like, there are loads of examples that I could have picked, but they're really boring. There's loads of like, because the easy route would be to pick like maybe action movies and stuff, where there's like a movie where there's like a monster, and it's not really I don't think the people making the movie really believe like they're making that's like a great monster that they've got on
where the
show.
monster's almost like a henchman of the bad guy kind of thing.
Exactly. And so I didn't really want to go down that route. I kind of wanted to focus more on like actual monsters that are supposed to be creepy, or supposed to have like a cool design. One thing I wanted to mention was the Wolfman from 2010, which I don't know why, but I went to see that with like my parents. I think they picked it, and I don't remember really knowing anything about the film. I mean, it's called The Wolfman. Like, there's not really much to know, but it wasn't like I'd followed, as far as I remember. I don't think I'd followed like any of the sort of like promotional stuff leading up to it. I think I just kind of went into it thinking, okay, it's called The Wolfman. I don't really have that much of an interest in like werewolves. Also, it came out in like early 2010, so Twilight was pretty big at the time. So again, there wasn't really a lot working in the favour of like werewolves at the point. But yeah, it was just, I just remember really not like enjoying the movie. I just thought it was like quite dull and quite uninteresting, and I remember thinking before going into it, I was like, I hope the wolf doesn't look really like crap, and it did.
And it did.
And that's, I think werewolves are a really difficult thing to pull off. Like I just think most of the time they just kind of look really fake, and they just look really sort of like, I know that people put a lot of like time and care into it and stuff, but for me they just don't really work for the most part. Yeah.
That's such a good point, because even like I think if I was to think of a werewolf, I would think of like just a giant big like imposing thing that looked like a wolf.
Yeah.
But then you watch like Harry Potter's a good example, when the werewolf's like a kind of horrible, kind of skinny, almost hairless, like mutt looking thing, and it's it's just a weird design, that werewolf.
Yeah, exactly. I don't. For me, there probably are. I mean, I'm not saying that all werewolf designs are bad, but I've just never. I don't think I've ever looked at a werewolf design and gone, oh my god, it's like that's fantastic design. So yeah, that was the sort of like top pick, just because like it was obviously going for something and it just did not land. Another one that I had, which is on the very, very different end of the spectrum, but it was a film that I had a friend who, he had the DVD of it, and I remember bringing it around a couple of times and I was watching it and just laughing the whole way through the film. Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus.
Oh my god, I've seen that.
There we go, brilliant. That's time for another deep dive. Yeah, that like, it's just, again, I mean, conceptually it's just very silly. But also the movie was made in a budget of like 20 pence. Reuses like the same footage like over and over again, which is terrible. Is that the one that
there was an amazing shot where where a woman's like, I can't even talk about it, when she's looking out a plane window and the shark comes up from nowhere and eats the plane.
It is, yeah, and there's like no lead into it as well. Like it's the movie's just like all over the place. It's been such a long time since I've seen it now, but I remember like literally me and my friend watching it, and just scene by scene we would break down just how everything in it was ridiculous.
I remember specifically there was this ridiculous like love story side like narrative, and it was just awful because the actors were just awful and it didn't make any sense. They didn't have any chemistry, and it was just very much like sex sales, put that in there and then we'll get back to the shark.
Exactly. Yeah, well, they didn't have the budget to show any more of the shark or the octopus than they did. But yeah, that was definitely like a prime example of like, okay, this is not working. Like, I guess that really is like, you know, I have a lot of love for the 1998 Godzilla movie. Like, when you hold Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus up next to it, like 1998 Godzilla is it's a masterpiece. Another one that I wanted to mention, which is less heinous than Mega Shark, but is one you've mentioned on this podcast before. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Was it all of them?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it. I literally just wrote the title of the movie for that one because, like, just everything in the movie kind of goes for there doesn't really work.
Yeah, I think that the scariest one was maybe the weird woman.
The white thing.
Yeah, and I think that was only scary because remember that Momo thing?
Yep.
I think that was only scary because that was around the time of that, and I think that's maybe what people, or I was associating with it, which was the Momo thing was scarier than the thing in the movie.
Yeah, exactly. And Momo had no budget. The movie did. What else did I have? I had zombies. So this is a very okay. I'm glad it's not just me. Yeah, this is this. I remember, like, I mean, it's been a while now since the zombie fad was like a big thing, almost like 10 years, I think. But yeah, I just don't find zombies that interesting. I don't find zombie movies that interesting because they're all just the same film, really. Like they don't really. There's not really that. There's not really anywhere to take it that's that exciting. I think, you know, and there are so many of them that it is just kind of like, even the ones that are good, I feel like have now just been diluted by all the ones that aren't, because again it is just the same thing over and over again.
That's so funny. I'm glad you said that because I've never been particularly fussed on zombies. I've always thought they were a wee bit lame, and I've always been like, well, it's that thing where they're so. I've argued with my dad about this a few times where I'm like, but they're so slow. Just get in your car and drive, and then you can drive somewhere. You can have a nap, go to sleep for 8 hours, and by that time they're still not caught up. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Like they are just like quite pathetic, and
because they're so, I feel like because they're so like they're like brainless, obviously. So just herd them in somewhere like sheep and just have a cull.
Exactly, and it's nuts as well, like how they're all like all the zombie films are basically American films. It's like they have so many weapons over there.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
And also so much space. Like in the UK, like everything's really small and compact, and like you'd maybe have more. Maybe there's a danger of like actually being like, you know, chased down an alleyway by a zombie. But like and
like you were in the Highlands, you'd be laughing if you were up there.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're sorted up there. But yeah, in America, where all the houses are like, you know, like a mile away from each other, and everyone has like RPGs, it's just there would be no threat whatsoever. Like you say, like they are so slow, and they just kind of do that, and they're just very silly. And I think as well, like, there's no like interesting way to develop them. You know, it's a lot of
the way to make zombies cool is to make them fast, which it didn't work.
No,
I mean,
exactly.
I haven't seen World War Z, but
it's, to be honest, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't scary in any sense. It was just kind of like, it felt more like an action movie. And so for that, I was like, okay, I appreciate that, because like it's a more interesting way to take it. But yeah, it's just that was it, wasn't it? It was like they just made zombies fast, and then they just had like CGI shots of them, and yeah, again, it's just that's like all you can really do to expand the concept, and it's not very interesting. So yeah, zombies are a big one for me. And then the last one I had was The Hills of Eyes. So the sort of mutant.
I actually only just watched that for the first time recently.
Really? Was it was it like 2004? Is that the one?
Yeah, I had that blonde woman that was in Lost. I can't remember her name. She's Australian.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah.
I've not watched it in a very long time, but I just remember watched it during my first ever like sort of like I'm into horror like sort of phases, and except it's not a phase because here we are. And yeah, I just like I was watching obviously loads and loads of horror movies, and that was one where I was like, it felt like I did have a reaction to the movie, like I was horrified, but it just felt like the movie went for like extreme sort of scenes, extreme sort of violence, extreme threats, and obviously the design again is good. It's a good design in the sense that the makeup's convincing and everything, but it is just sort of like these mutated, and it just kind of feels like they're supposed to be like grotesque looking and horrible and sort of irradiated. And yeah, again, there's not really much to them. Like that's the thing. I guess it goes back to like what we're talking about. Like you look at something like Alien, and there's so much like thought and there's so much like depth to that creation. And then The Hills of Eyes, it's like, oh well, a nuclear bomb went off near them, so they rape people and they're pretty messed up. So that's them. And
I love that like the little girl as well. I can't remember her name now, but obviously everyone in her entire family was this horrible, evil person, and then she, for no apparent reason, having grown up in that environment, suddenly had a conscience, and she was like, no, we're not going to do that. I'm going to save this baby. Like
like the nature and nurture are working against her.
Yeah, exactly.
So The Hills of Eyes was a no from me. What were your picks, Captain?
So that's interesting, because one that I was thinking about was similar to Hills of Eyes, and that's House of a Thousand Corpses.
I've not seen that.
Have you seen it? It's a good movie, and it's good if you enjoy horror movies, because it's like a kind of classic. But yeah, the villains, there was one particular bit in the movie that was like a victim, and what they did to him was scarier than most of the villains, if you know what I mean. It was again kind of Hills of Eyes, kind of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where it was like a family of just creepy murderers. And the kind of main villain in that, the professor, I think his name was, he was just a bit like blah. Like he didn't really do much. When he finally showed up, it was very anticlimactic. So yeah, that was probably one for me. Another one, this is a very personal one, and it's more of a gripe than anything else, but I did want to mention it. And that is the character of Hyde in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Have you seen it?
Yes, but once when I was literally a child, so I don't remember like anything.
Not great, but obviously the point of the movie is they've got all these kind of like famous like literary characters banding together. I can't even remember what it is they're doing, but they've banded together for something. And Dr. Jekyll's there, and they've got like a kind of Hulk thing going on where he's obviously got his potion, so he can transform himself at will into Hyde. But having read the book, the point of Hyde is that he is evil personified. That he's just the worst human being ever, but in the movie somehow he's got some control over it. And when he's Hyde, it's pretty much just like the Hulk. When he's Hyde, he's big and strong and like mutated almost. But then he's got like control over it, so he does nice things. And it just like absolutely infuriated me. Because I'm like, if you're going to use Jekyll and Hyde, Jekyll's a good guy and Hyde's a bad guy. Like, that's the whole point. So yeah, that was just a little gripe from me.
And that's very fair. It's very fair, like you say, if they're going to actually take like established literary characters.
Yeah, that'd be like having like a movie about Dracula and then being like, he's actually not a blood-sucking vampire.
He just like hangs out in the sun the whole time.
Mm-hmm. And then, funnily enough, one of my least favourites was one of your favourites, and that was Pennywise the Clown.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
That's a surprise.
Yeah. I don't know if it's maybe just because I have no issues with clowns. I don't think they're scary. Do you know what I mean? We had clowns at birthday parties growing up. I think, like, I like clowns. I think when they're good, they're pretty funny.
That's fair. Brave of you to say.
Yeah, I know. I remember, like, obviously there was a big fad for a while where everyone was terrified of clowns, and I'm like, they're fine. Like,
to be...
Oh, sorry?
Sorry, I was going to say, to be fair, I am the same. Like, I mean, I feel like they're a lot more sinister now that I'm an adult than...
Oh, yeah.
I was never really bothered by them when I was younger. I feel like... But the whole, like, everyone constantly talking about how clowns are really creepy has now just met, like, my natural reaction to clowns is, oh, that's a bit, like, off. But it's also because, like, when you're a kid, you're around clowns and... there's a clown epidemic where there's just like people aren't becoming clowns anymore because people are scared of clowns. So I think that's the thing as well, is like because you don't see any real clowns anymore. The only like reference for clowns we have are just all the creepy clowns.
That's true, that's fair. And remember there was that weird time when people were dressing up as clowns and like standing outside people's houses and in the middle of the roads.
Yeah, exactly. Which is
that was creepy, I'll admit that. But exactly. It wasn't the clown suit that made it creepy. Oh, sorry. No, basically my justification for this was I haven't seen the Tim Curry ones, and I've only seen the first It one, so it's not very fair, but I'm going with it. I just feel like he wasn't particularly, I don't know if I'm just misremembering, but I feel like he wasn't particularly murderous. In my memory, he only kind of bit off Georgie's arm, and then did he eat him? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Georgie disappeared anyway. But so, in my memory, that's all he did, and then he just, almost like a Scooby-Doo character, was just scaring the kids for the rest of the movie. That's kind of the vibes that I got from it. And, I mean, what he was doing to them was very scary. He was taking, like traumatic memories and stuff, but I don't know. I don't know if it's maybe that thing, I think we've spoken about it before, but I'm not a massive fan of movies full of child actors, so it could be that as well.
Yeah, that's fair. Part 1 is not the film for you.
Yeah, I don't know. As I say, in my memory, he's not particularly murderous. He doesn't really pose much of a threat other than scaring them, which I suppose if you were a child would be horrifying.
Yeah. I think
he kills a bully, actually, does he?
Yeah, I think he does kill a couple of people, and they do, I'm pretty sure, establish that I think part of like what he feeds on is like the fear and all that, the whole energy and stuff, which is obviously just like, it's a convenient excuse for him doing creepy things, but I appreciate the fact that there is at least an excuse. Yeah. For me, I do like the mythology around like the monster. Like I like the fact that there's like, you know, he's sort of tied to the town and the history.
Yeah, he does have a story, yeah, and because is it every 33 years or something like that?
Yeah, that sounds right. Again, I'm not like, I've seen this chapter 1 when it was in cinemas. I've seen it once, and I watched the 90s movie on DVD like literally like 11 years ago, and I think I watched that like once. So I have like, I know ish the story, but I'm not like, I'm like the big nerd who can tell you all the facts. But I just remember, I think I just appreciated the fact that there was like lore there. There was like actually again just like that whole thing of like, okay, there is actually like a story, and there's and because he's not even like a clown. That's just like a form it takes, and I quite like that aspect of it. Again, like same as you, like him being a clown wasn't like, I wasn't creeped out by that fact, but I really liked Tim Curry's performance.
Tim Curry's amazing, in fairness.
Yeah, exactly. And I like the fact that it's a chosen thing to unsettle the kids. So I like the way that it's sort of done, but I do get what you're saying with it. He does. It's just a lot of him like not killing the kids.
Yeah. And I think as well there was the whole kind of end sequence. from my memory, was very like CGI heavy, and I couldn't even really remember / figure out what was going on when they were all in his kind of like lair thing. I think by that point I had already like checked out. I was like, this is not for me.
That's fair. To be fair, I think from my memory, I think I actually liked it part 2 more than
less
chapter 2.
Less child actors. Is that why?
Yeah. I don't know. It's weird because I remember everyone raving on about like chapter 1, and I did like chapter 1. Like I thought it was good, but I don't remember loving it. And I think part of that was I remember when I watched the 90s movie when I watched the DVD of it, I remember really, really digging like the first like half of it basically. And then I remember it falling apart at the end. I think I was just really invested in the story and like the world they were setting up, and then the payoff to it I thought was terrible.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, and I think that was the thing, I think watching the New It movies, when I was watching part 1, I was aware that like I'd really enjoyed the first part of the original, and I was aware that I also don't remember really being scared by like It Chapter 1. Like I remember there being scenes where I was like, okay, this movie's like, this is it trying to be scary, but it's just not really doing it for me. But part 2, and again, I don't remember part 2 being like intensely scary or anything. But I think with part 2, I went in going, okay, this was the part that, you know, the original got wrong, and from what I knew about the books, I was like, the books also got wrong. So I was very much braced for like part 2 not being great at all, and I think I was just like really pleasantly surprised at part 2, and I think for me it delivered. So yeah, I prefer at part 2, and I maybe worth giving it a go because
yeah, I might.
No child actors to.
I know. Thank God. Yeah, no, so thank you for that. On that note, the last part we wanted to do something a wee bit different, and that was kind of talk about, we love a good old and new comparison on this podcast. So, basically, we've both chosen a film which has been remade, and it's a film starring a movie monster. So yeah, basically, Sam, if you want to fire away, tell us what your movie is and what your thoughts were.
So my pick was Nightmare on Elm Street, just because it's an interesting one. Obviously there's like 7 Nightmare on Elm Street movies in the original like canon, with Robert Englund in the role, and then in 2010 they rebooted it, and it was, what's his name? The actor who played Rorschach in the Watchmen movies. It will come back to me.
He was in Shutter Island as well. He was super creepy in Shutter Island, I remember.
It was something Jackie Earl Haley, is that his name?
Pass.
But he's, yeah, they basically, yeah, obviously the original Nightmare on Elm Street is a classic. Is one of the lovely Wes Craven's finest works, and again, going back to everything we sort of talked about with movie monsters, I think just the concept of Freddy Krueger is really creepy. Like, I think the idea of he's in your dreams, and I love the fact that there's a mystery behind it as well. You don't really know who he is, you don't really know what he is, you don't really know how he's doing this or why, and it's played really well, but it's just that inevitability of like, you have to go to sleep.
You cannot escape him,
and you're in his domain, and the weirdness of dreams and stuff is handled really well, and also the fact that like obviously you don't know when you're asleep and things like that. There's so many like cool and clever ideas in there, and again the design of Freddy Krueger is really good. Obviously the sort of striped sweater, the glove, the sort of burnt skin, like there is a really cool design there that's just really memorable. It really stands out. Obviously again the performance, all the sort of aspects we touched on before I think are like realised so well in Nightmare on Elm Street. It is another like standout example of like a good movie monster, and obviously I didn't mention it before because I knew we'd be talking about it here. But yeah, I think it's like I do think it's like such a fantastic design, and the thing is like I'm not against them remaking it at all. Like, there's been 7 original movies. I don't think them remaking Nightmare on Elm Street diminishes the original in any way. And I do actually think that it's like, it is an idea that, like, if they remade Alien, I'd be annoyed, mostly because they've done so many sequels and stuff anyway. It's like, why bother?
Yeah.
But like,
I'm like, you got it right first time.
yeah, exactly. But like Nightmare on Elm Street is one of those where it's like, you can do something really different with that. Like you can make a really different horror film with those elements, and make it really effective. And they do try and do some different stuff with the new one. They try and make the character, the creepier, and at the same time, not. It's weird, like, because they do the whole, so they make him like an outright paedophile in the new version, but they don't tell you that at first. And they actually, at one point in the movie,
there's like a weird bit in the middle where it's.
Yeah, they pretend they go down the route of, oh, maybe he was innocent and he was like, killed by our parents when he shouldn't have been, and he's kind of a victim. And that, again, it's like an interesting idea, but then to go from that to like the other extreme of like, no, he actually was a paedophile. He was way worse.
He was.
Yeah, not only was he bad, but he was really bad. But yeah, like, again, like, I don't dislike the remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, I remember watching it a few times with friends and stuff, and it made for a good double feature, the original, then the remake and stuff, and there were some good jump scares and things like that.
I think that there's definitely
really
some good bits in the new one. There was one bit that I liked when Nancy was kind of running along the hallway, and then it kind of just became like a pool. She almost like fell through the hallway. That was a really good bit.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of elements that I like. I'm not saying that it's like they absolutely like botched it, but I think for me it's just a case of like, it's a shame that it's just wasted potential, really. Like, it's a shame that it wasn't more, because I really do feel like it could have been, like, they could have done something really cool with it. And I think the interesting thing as well is, like, the movie came out in early 2010. It's interesting that Inception, any excuse for a plug, Inception came out that same year, and I feel like
crazy.
I feel like if they'd held fire on it a little bit, if they delayed it and the movie come out after Inception or around the same time, probably would have actually had a bigger impact, because people would have been on that dream high, and
that's such a good point.
Gone to see it based on that, and if maybe if they hadn't just remade it, then they might have produced a remake of it following Inception that would have been much more interesting. So yeah, I think it's just like, the design of it is, they do make him look more like a sort of Burns victim as well. They obviously maintain the claw, but they do drop. I've not seen like the later Nightmare on Elm Street movies, but I'm aware that Freddy gets like quite campy. And there is an element of that in the first one, but they do kind of drop that, and they just have him as this sort of like, deep voiced, like, sort of menacing figure. So again, which isn't a problem. Like, again, I appreciate the fact that they do lean into, like, they do want to sell him as a threat and as this sort of menacing figure. But yeah, for me, it's just a case of, and I guess it's more the case of the movie than the actual monster being the problem here. But I do think it's just a case of like wasted potential.
Yeah. No, very good point. I definitely think that as well. I think I get what you mean about being wasted potential, because I feel like the first one was very of its time. It was very 80s. It was quite campy at parts. And yeah, I think if they could have just gone a bit harder.
Yeah, because they remake a lot of the scenes as well. Like, they redo like the sort of classic moments, and again, it's like, you don't need to do that. Like, those scenes, that makes it feel like a waste, because it's like, why are you wasting time, like, showing us what we've literally already seen?
Yeah.
And it was, even things like the hand in the bath and stuff. Yeah, it's a great shot. It's done really well, but it's not improved in any way by like modern cameras.
Exactly. Yeah, you could have done some kind of play on that. Like, I don't know what you could have done. Maybe if she was like in the shower and like a kind of grudge hand coming up the back, maybe. Yeah, exactly. It would have felt a bit more fresh almost if they didn't just rehash almost like exactly certain scenes. But yeah.
Exactly, and you have the concept, and you have Freddy Krueger, and you have the name. You have enough with those elements that that sells it. You don't need to show people the same shots to get them in the cinema. Like, I don't think people were sitting hearing about this movie, or seeing the poster or the trailer. I don't think people are going like, oh, but does it have the bathtub shot in it? Like, oh, that'll make or break the movie for me. Like, it's just,
or
it's
the
just
bit
not
when
how
he kind
people...
of comes out the wall behind the bed. I'm like, that wasn't for me the most memorable part of the original movie anyway. Like, why did you choose that specific scene? If anything, I would have gone with the one where like Johnny Depp sucked into the bed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and all the blood sort of pours out and
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they do. It's weird how they just kind of pick these moments and they're like, well, these bits. It wouldn't be Nightmare on Elm Street without these exact scenes.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but yeah, so
No.
that's
Yeah,
my
thank you
thoughts
very
on
much.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
So for my choice, I've gone for the movie The Fly, the 1958 version and the 1986 one. So not quite as contemporary as yours. The did you see the original? No, did you get a chance? No,
Apologies.
that's all right. It was. It felt. I was trying to think. I should have looked up movies that also came out around the same time, because it felt very very dated. The original one, and from my understanding, it was very close to the source material. I think it was a short story, or a book.
No,
So
it was a short story. Do you know? Do you know where it was? Do you know where the short story was published?
no,
Playboy magazine.
wow.
So clearly, someone was getting it for the articles. If obviously the movie was then made.
That's amazing. Um, so yeah, the original movie, basically the concept of the movie, if if you haven't seen the original, all you need to do is watch the Treehouse of Horror, the Simpsons episode. That pretty much explains exactly what happens in the original movie. So basically, this guy, he's created a teleporter, and he tests it on himself, but there's a fly in there, and their DNA gets mixed. And he comes out, and he's got fly head, and the fly comes out, and he's got the human head, right? And it sounds very funny when I'm talking about it in the movie, as there are laughable moments in the original movie. But, like, as a concept, it's quite interesting, right? It's obviously a bit better than I've described it. But the original movie, I sent you the picture, and that's all you need to see is that picture, because it's very much a man in a trench coat with a fly's head. Like, this giant, big, furry, minging fly's head on his head. And that's, do you know, the funniest part of the movie is obviously he can't speak because he's got fly's head. So he's trying to communicate with his wife through the door of the lab, right? He's writing her letters and things. And then when he finally lets her in the lab, he's standing there and he's got his trench coat and he's got his hand in his pocket. And he's just got this, like, tablecloth over his head. Just like this black tablecloth. And he's just standing there and he's, like, pointing to things, and it's just so funny. Like, it's unreal how funny it was. And it really took away from the movie. And I feel like it shouldn't have been that bad. 1958 there was good movies coming out then.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It should not have been that bad. Yeah, so that was that one. And then there was that really famous bit at the end when Vincent Price's character finds the fly with the human head, and he's trapped in a spider's web, and he's shouting "Help me" in this little squeaky voice, which the Simpsons do as well. They do it very well.
All I'm thinking about is the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror one.
No joke. That's exactly when Bart's got that head, that's exactly what it looks like in the movie. But it's weird because the fly with the human head obviously has the human's brain because he's stuck in a spider web and he's shouting "Help me." But the person with the fly head also has the human's brain because he can communicate with his wife and.
Maybe the fly was just like was a proper fly in the wall, just like eavesdropped, and he knows their relationship. He knows how they.
Yeah, maybe he's just like a master manipulator.
Yeah, exactly. The fly pulls all the strings.
So that was the 1958 one. The 1986 one was a very different movie, like very different. And I remember reading that the writer David Cronenberg, I think it was.
He was one of the writers.
Director, yeah. He purposely kind of changed the story, so... And it did make it feel a bit more modern, where... It's the same kind of idea. The scientist, in this case Jeff Goldblum, has created this teleporter, and he tries it out with himself, and it works successfully, and then discovers that there was a fly in there with him. But their genes have, their DNA, have, spliced together, so there's no little fly with Jeff Goldblum's head. It's just the one creature, monster, if you will. And the whole movie is done really well, where almost the entire movie is his transition from himself as a man into what he calls the Brundlefly.
Brundlefly, yeah.
And it's done so well, and it's funny because it came out after The Thing, and it's very much, it's all about like body horror, and it's horrific at times. Like, I really like the Thing movie, and I was chatting to my boyfriend about this, and he said that he wasn't keen on The Thing because he thought it was too much, and I was like, do not watch The Fly then. If you if you thought The Thing was too much, The Fly is on a whole other level.
I do agree. They do. It is like, yeah, it is as you said, as you like sort of pre-warned me. It is a disgusting movie. Like, there is a lot of like obviously body horror, but there's just a lot of like really gross moments.
Yeah, I'm not particularly squeamish, but there was times where I was watching that and I was like, God, this is too much.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I've seen a lot of like disgusting stuff on film, but it's just, yeah, it's one of those where like him throwing up and stuff and on the food, and yeah.
And
the makeup is very sorry.
Yeah, sorry. No, talking about the makeup, the makeup artist, rightly so, won the Oscar for best makeup, so that
Absolutely.
was very well deserved.
Yeah, and it's nice to actually see it go to like a sort of genre film as well, and yeah, because the makeup effects in that movie are outstanding, and obviously there is like different stages. I think there's like 7 different stages, to like the sort of fly.
It's really interesting as well that we don't follow him the whole time. That we, similar to Gina Davis's character, we come back and see how he's changing every time.
Yeah.
And every time it just gets more and more horrific. And I remember reading that the part where his ear falls off, they didn't tell Gina Davis that they were going to do that, so her reaction was genuine. And I'm sure that was her, like, they were together at the time,
Yeah,
so that would have been horrifying. You get that it's a job, but you're chatting to your partner and his ear falls off.
Yeah, I know, what a way to like have to view your partner and like, and all that makeup and the performance and stuff, and yeah, it's revolting in a lot of ways, but that's what it's trying to do. It's what it's trying to achieve.
It was definitely the better movie and the better monster than the original, and it like you were saying that Nightmare on Elm Street didn't do this, changed it enough to make it a different movie, and arguably a much better movie, disgusting as it was. I think as well, the actual final transformation into the Brundlefly was just obscene. Like, it was grotesque. And it was like body horror at its finest. And it wasn't it wasn't like a torture porn kind of slashery horror. It was like proper horror, like one of the ones that you were chatting about earlier where you think about it later on. Yes.
Yeah, it definitely, it does like leave an impression, that movie. Like, you do kind of walk away from it and you do think about it a lot.
Yeah.
Which is impressive for something that is, again, like the concept of it is very specific. It's not like, it's not something, I'm not likely to jump in a teleporter with a fly anytime soon.
Yeah.
But it
Certainly
does
just seen that movie.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sworn off teleporters for life now. But it is just a really like effective horror. Like, it really does like unsettle you, and it does leave an impression. It does leave you thinking about it like well after the credits kind of roll.
Definitely. And I think apparently I had read somewhere that they had a deleted scene that they pulled because it was too much for that movie. So that tells you what it was like. With the monkey cat thing.
Yeah, I've seen clips of it.
I googled it out of curiosity.
Have you heard about the ending that they chopped?
No, I don't think so.
So they filmed and they test screened a cut with an upbeat ending, because it does end. I thought
I
it
do
ended
know
like
about
quite
this.
abruptly.
Yeah.
And the original ending is she has like Gina Davis is with I can't remember what the character's called, the ex-boyfriend. She's back with him, and she has this dream where she's obviously pregnant with Brundlefly's spawn, and obviously she has that nightmare sequence earlier in the film where she like gives birth and it's like a maggot, which
and that was really, really horrifying. And I think it was even more horrifying because it was expertly done, because you didn't realise that was a dream sequence.
Exactly, it does.
And it obviously was shot different to the rest of the movie, to the rest of the parts in Jeff Goldblum's apartment. So it just felt like a new scene, and it was just horrifying.
Yeah, but yeah, they basically invert that, and it's like a positive dream sequence where she dreams she has a baby with like butterfly wings, and I think it like flies off into like the sunset. Again, I only saw like fragments of it. I was watching like a sort of video essay on the fly, just literally just before this podcast. So it just showed like small clips. Same with like the baboon cat thing. But yeah, like it's. I mean, I get what they were going for with it, but I'm glad that they did drop it, because as much as I did think the movie ended a bit abruptly, I'd rather that than
that would absolutely just detract from everything they had done in the movie up until that point.
Exactly, and it's weird to go from like, because it is really bleak, that whole like last where like it's on the ground and it gets the shotgun, holds the shotgun up to its head, which is a really like powerful sort of scene, and to go from that to just like this like fantastical sort of dream sequence. Again, I get what they were going for. I think it's one of those things that like the concept of it could like I can see why people would like believe in that, but yeah, I don't think it works, and it was rightly sort of cut in my opinion.
No, but overall it's a weird one, because I would say that it was worth a watch, but at the same time I would, if anyone was going to watch it, I would just, a word of caution.
Yeah, you know absolutely. I mean? Yeah, don't be eating your dinner when you're watching that movie.
No. Oh god, no. And it was funny because I remember my mum like for years has spoken about, she doesn't like The Thing, she's told me about that, but she's always spoken about The Fly, and the way she describes it is, if anyone mentions the movie The Fly, she just says, disgusting movie. That's her review.
She is very right. So yep. That is the spot on review.
But yeah, no, thank you very much, Sam. I think on that note we can wrap up. We've spoken endless amounts about Alien in particular, but clearly the best movie monster. But no, thank you very much. I think your choices were super interesting. I think it's always interesting as well. It can be such like a personal thing, what people find scary and stuff like that. So it's always super interesting to find out. But no, thank you again, Sam.
Oh, thank you. I enjoyed the topic, and I enjoyed your picks as well. It was a good discussion.
Thank you. Even though we disagreed about Pennywise, but you did make some valid points, so I'll accept that. We agreed about the zombies at least. That's true. That's the main takeaway. I'm so glad someone else is on my. It's such like a weird opinion that you don't want to voice in case people just go off their nut. Yeah, no, I agree. Like, it's something that I don't mention very often, but yeah. So I'm glad we're on the same team on that one. Same. But yeah, so in a couple of weeks' time, will be your choice. So I'm excited to see what you go for. And yeah, we'll see you then. Farewell. See ya.